Hello everybody and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports, and today we are going to be looking at 5 ways to try and improve SA Rugby. Just some suggestions or some thoughts basically on to try and sort of remedy the domestic setup, which has kind of fallen away slowly over the years with more sort of players moving overseas, especially younger in their careers. We saw in the past a lot of players used to finish their careers and you try and get that sort of final paycheck. Whereas now we're seeing players being signed right out of school and going overseas. So just looking at a couple of suggestions to try and keep the quality, try and keep our best players in the country, improve the quality of all the sides, not just sort of the top 2 or top 3 or top 4 sides, but to try and establish a base of really good sides and franchises across the country to try and sort of reignite the domestic scenes. I think at the moment it's just become a bit bland. There's been a lot of complaints about the standard of Currie Cup and the standard of Super Rugby and Locked Rugby in the past couple of months. And I think COVID will play a certain part, but I think a lot of it is also that our best players are not playing in the country at the moment. I mean, you look at the World Cup winning squad, and there are lots of standout players, the likes of Pollard, Faf de Klerk, Frans Malherbe, Etzebeth, Lou Diago. There's so many players that are playing their rugby overseas. Andre Estesen, Damien Dale-Indy, this Willie Leroux. There are a lot of players that we just would probably really benefit us if we could try and keep up the best players here and try and improve our domestic scene. I think that's the biggest issue, is that with so many players leaving, that what we left behind is not a true reflection of the best talent. And I mean, Rusty Rasmus even said it last year where he talked about there being over 800 professional rugby players that are all from South Africa. But a lot of them are overseas, which is the issue. So we're just looking at sort of 5 different ways that we can try and sort of begin to try and fix this and try and strengthen our domestic setup. Before we go any further, please do subscribe to the channel. Bottom right hand corner there, smash a like on the video as well. Without any further ado, let's get into the 5 things we can try and do to try and improve the situation in the country. Now this one, I don't think there's much debate on. The fact, the idea of privatizing unions has been coming for a long time. And it really, really is important that this actually does happen. We need more investment in our unions. We need more money. We need to be able to keep our best players. We need better infrastructure. We need to be able to grow our brands on a global scale. And we've seen what the financial injection in the Bulls has done with bringing Jake White back, with bringing the likes of Arno Botha and Nizam Carr. Now it looks like they're going to be bringing Marcel Coetzee. Possibly bringing back Francois Hoogaard, Morné Steyn coming back. So many players coming back to the Bulls. Dwayne Vermeulen. There's just so many players that have come back because they can afford to pay them sort of the bigger contracts to try and get the incentive to come back. So the Sharks now have obviously been acquired by an American corporation, or conglomerate rather. So and it looks like they're going to have lots of investment there, and the fact that Rock Nation's involved and they're going to be sort of trying to expand the brand on a global scale speak volumes about the value of privately owned unions. And like unions like the Lions there is a lot of private ownership, but we haven't quite seen the same sort of financial injection. And I think that's what we need to see. We see it overseas in like the French clubs and in the likes of football, for example, where lots of big money comes into clubs and all of a sudden you can start churning out results, getting the best players. And the thing is, the best players are South African. We've got some of the best players in the world. There's no doubt about that. You look at all the leagues and they're always a top performing South African. Across all the leagues, the Premiership, the Pro 14, Top 14, the Japanese leagues is always very high profile South Africans. So the thing is, we need to be able to have the money to try and keep them in South Africa and to be able to compete with the pound and the euro and try and use the rand. We need to have a lot more sort of private investment to try and get the sort of sums and the money needed to try and do it. But the first step of that is to, even if it's completely privatize unions and make them almost privately owned companies, really, and where there's no limit to the amount of financial reward and financial money that can be put into the game itself. Now, this is something which might be a little bit controversial, but for me, it's just something that's been coming for a long time, and that is we need to move away from an almost archaic, in many ways, attitude towards having everything provincialized in this country. And we see it in the PSL where there's no reason why you cannot have several sides from the same city. This whole sort of having to do a provincial setup where we have to have, we've got 2 sides from Gauteng, but then 1 side from the Western Cape, 1 side from Natal, and then we've got sides from Kimberley in the Northern Cape, and we've got sides from Mpumalanga. We need to try and move away from that, in my opinion. We need to be trying to look at where the resources are, where are the best schools, where are the best academies, where are the best universities. Where can we establish more teams? How can we, in a province like the Western Cape, where you've got so many good schools, you've got all the Paarls, you've got Wynberg, you've got Sachs, you've got Bishops, to name a few, you've got so many good schools down there. You've got Stellenbosch, and you've got UCT, and UWC, all 3 playing Varsity Cup. Then you've got CPUT as well, Varsity Shield side. There's so much rugby within the Western Cape. I mean, we've got one side. Why can we not have? I mean, you've got the Dani Craven Stadium. Why not set up a big side in Stellenbosch? And you could have the Stormers in the Western Province based at Newlands and in Cape Town, and you affiliate with UCT, you can affiliate with UWC, you can affiliate with CPUT, and then you've got Stellenbosch University, which is a rugby powerhouse, and you can have your own side. It just makes so much more sense. And why can't you have 3 sides in Gauteng? I mean, let's be honest, the Griquas will always struggle because locationally, Kimberley just doesn't have the same sort of infrastructure there are other places. You look at the PSL and you think that you've got Orlando Pirates and Kaizer Chiefs both based in Johannesburg, and then you've got Sundowns in Pretoria and Mamelodi. I mean, there's just so many sides, in the same thing. And you see it in everywhere, really. You go and look at sort of football. I mean, I use football as an example because they are the biggest sort of money and sort of global sporting powerhouses. You look at the Premier League and the amount of clubs based in London, so we need to move away from just sort of provincial. And I mean, yeah, 100% agree with we need to have an Eastern Cape side, but I mean, you can almost have 2 Eastern Cape sides. There's so much rugby down there. How is it that we don't even have a single one at the moment? And a lot of these sort of 5 reasons all link into each other. And the fact that if you privatize, why not start a union or a club in sort of, I don't know, Northern Johannesburg? You can put a nice sort of 10 to 15,000 seats in some place like Midrand in Johannesburg, where you can then, and it doesn't necessarily have this massive, huge stadium, but you can establish an academy, you can affiliate with one of the universities, and you can bring with the schools and create a whole sort of pipe, and just further the pipeline. Because I just think that we need better quality sides, and I think, locationally, Nelspruit and Kimberley are always going to struggle simply because of the location. It's just they don't necessarily have the schools, they don't have the universities, they don't have the surrounding infrastructure and the rugby sort of around them to really be able to sort of create a very direct pipeline of the best players. All the players that are really good sort of tend to come down to Gauteng or go to the Western Cape or go to Natal, because those are where your big sides are. But we need to try and move away from being so provincialized. And why not have 3 sides in Gauteng? Why not have 2 sides in the Western Province? Why not have 2 sides in Natal if you can do it? We don't necessarily only need to be based on provincial setups. Once again, this links with it. And I think that, you look at the pipeline, the Varsity Cup has been massive for SA Rugby. Varsity Cup and Varsity Shield. Having that university competition is huge. But I also think that we need to have more academies, even if they're linked with schools, so that there is a sort of a pipeline where, you look at the Western Province Rugby Institute down in it's based, there's two campuses, one in Stellenbosch and one in Cape Town, and it all sort of links, and they're affiliated with UCT and Marties, so players that play in the Western Province Rugby Institute can play for Marties, for example, if they're at Stellenbosch. Will play for UCT, and then they become eligible for the Western Province under 21s and under 19, stuff like that. You're at the Sharks Academy. There's a couple of academies around, but I think we need more academies so that it's sort of, you need to have a very direct pipeline where you're going to go school to academy affiliated with a university or affiliated with a club, then affiliated with a union, so that you can sort of see a step-by-step progress, and how you, as a schoolboy, you can think, right, I'm going to go there, and be part of the academy, even for during schoolboy levels. And there can be a direct line straight to the top, and you don't have to sit there and come to a crossroads all the time where you then decide, I'm going to go down there, I'm going to go down there. Where am I going to go to try and take my game to the next level? How am I going to try and make it on the bigger stage? And this once again links to it. And I think that, as I said, you cannot underestimate the impact the Varsity Cup and the Varsity Shield has had on SA Rugby. And there are so many players that have played in the various in the Varsity Cup and Varsity Shield, which have gone on to play for the Springboks, and it's been such a good way of, first of all, reigniting the sort of the passion within universities. I mean, it's so well supported. You see the Dani Craven Stadium packed to the brim, but you've also seen some really good players come through. You've seen Luat Diago. I mean, for example, something like Piwe Dianti. Despite all the controversy currently, he is a sole product of the Varsity Cup. Without the Varsity Cup, we wouldn't have had a Piwe Dianti. Other players you might have seen, but he is a very good example of someone who just started playing res rugby, came to the Varsity Cup, and suddenly sort of burst into the scene. And we need to see more of that. There are so many sides, and we've got to affiliate all these universities, all these sides, with unions, so there is a pipeline. Even if they're not necessarily always producing the best players, there needs to be some sort of affiliation, some sort of collaboration between all the university sides, all the Varsity Cup sides, all the Varsity Shield sides, and the union, so that there is more sort of interchanging between the teams, so that you can sort of sit there and go, I can go to this university and know that I still have a chance to make the side, to make the union side, or make the provincial side, because there is that possibility. Because that, first of all, strengthens all the universities. It means you don't have to only just go to one or two. So instead of having Tux, who's got 3, 4, 5 great teams, you can have other smaller universities which can produce really good teams, because it is a viable option for young players to move to these universities and play sport. Coming from somebody that's been involved in Rhodes University sport, it's a very small university, and the biggest problem is because there's no sort of affiliation and there's no sort of pathway for players to move from there to bigger things, you'll always struggle to attract the biggest talent. And I mean, somebody like Walter Sisulu University have put a lot of money into the rugby program, suddenly producing very, very good players. There needs to be a direct link between them and the EP Elephants or Border or whatever, wherever you want to go, and how they can then sort of climb the ladder into better sides and try and unearth more and more talent. And it all helps with transformation, more youth talent. It'll only help SA Rugby as a whole. Now, right now, considering what we've just seen, it'll sound like a really bad suggestion, because we've seen how the Greek Pumas are so off the pace. But if we look at the first 4 steps and trying to build this pipeline, keeping players, if we keep our best players in the country, if we have bigger pipelines where more players are being identified, if we have more academies where we can sort of supplement teams, if we de-provincialize the unions and have more sides in sort of dense populations and places where there are better facilities, why can we not try and aim to try and get up to, an 8 or 10 team Currie Cup, which is competitive? Because that's the whole point, is to try and spread the talent. First of all, keep all the talent and then spread it around. And I think that's why it all ties together. If you de-provincialize the unions, you can keep, you don't have to, you can move from the Lions to a side in Johannesburg without even having to move house. There doesn't have to be this whole moving my family every single time I want to move, because there are other options within the same province, or even they are smaller. It's easier to go to Johannesburg to Pretoria than to go from Johannesburg to Cape Town. And I think that's the issue. I mean, if you're in Natal and you fancy leaving the union, suddenly you're moving your family halfway across the country. You're either coming to Gauteng or you're going to the Western Cape. So we de-provincialize the unions. It makes it easier for players to sort of stay and commit to a certain place. I think we privatize unions, then we have the money to try and keep players. More academies and the universities feed into this, and then we could try and move towards having a premiership, having a top 14. When you look at 800 players, you can have 10 top quality teams. The amount of players in the country. In fact, maybe we should actually do that and sit there and look at all the professional players and all the professional South African players, and if we had to divide them, how many top sides can we form? So let me know if you'd be interested in that in the comments below. Smash like on the video. Let me know what you think of our suggestions. What are your suggestions? Anything that you would like to add that you think could add to SA Rugby? Let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Stephen, and I'll chat to you soon.